Cocaine-induced psychosis is similar. Add in a bipolar psychosis and you get God complexes, you get paranoid delusions, you get absolute lack of connection to what is real and here and now. I could not conscience that this idea of Alcoholics Anonymous was connected to the metaphysical nonsense of everybody's pretend friend who lives in the sky. Don't be so stupid. I processed the pain of my using, but feeling that I am now doing God's work, living a good life, and I'm happy, joyous, and free. The program has provided that for me.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Christopher. Hi fellow 12 Steppers, welcome to this new episode of 12 Steps and 12 Questions. You all know the deal by now. Please rate the pod wherever you can, and if you or someone you know would like to be a guest, reach out to me on 12steps12questions@gmail.com or join our WhatsApp group. All links are in the show notes. Now, let's get to my guest for today. Christopher, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name's Christopher. I'm very excited to be here. I am a grateful recovering addict. I have been around for a while now, 11 years. I can't quite believe it. I have service, I have sponsees, and I am very excited about whatever is about to take place.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Let's not waste any time. Let's get to the first of the 12 questions that I ask each and every guest on this pod. So, Christopher, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
That would have been a very easy question to answer before I came into recovery. Because when I was in my madness and when I was in my full flight, I would have told you I had a blissful childhood. Absolutely blissful, loving family, huge family, no traumatic events of death, bereavement, or challenges in my childhood. Went through school, university, all fine. Everyone survived. But as I have started to unpeel myself and get to know myself and grow as I have done through recovery, and also I've received some outside help. I can see that there were pressures, there were challenges, and there were unresolved traumas, which I don't think made me an addict. I don't think I became an addict because of my childhood. I believe I was always an addict. And I can't point to one event and say that was a trauma that made me pick up. But now I look back and I think, no, I had unresolved issues, as everybody does. I have bipolar disorder. I'm a very out and proud gay man. I grew up in suburban England. Add those three things together and someone might say, oh, that's a terrible childhood. That's not my recollection. My recollection is of sun and laughter and cords and flagged trousers. So I see the answer to the question is no, I can't point to a specific or a systemic trauma in my childhood. But I think growing up gay and growing up as an addict and growing up with a mental health condition is enough to get you going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. And of course, I mean, I like the way that, and this is something that I've encountered a few times now on this pod, is that we need to qualify everything first and caveat it first before we then sort of say, well, but there was this, that, and the other. And it's just part and parcel of what we do, of course, you know, of having made some progress with the way we looked at things and so on. But nonetheless, I often find that even though we might not have had capital T trauma, apart from the question as to whether this is the one thing that turns you into an addict, which we have already established it didn't. But nonetheless, there's enough there to get you going, as you said. And did you have mental health issues in your childhood already? And was that a factor?
Well, I was 22 when I was diagnosed, but it made perfect sense of my childhood. A completely hyperactive child, totally emotionally incontinent, totally going through enormous highs and lows. Like perhaps, I mean, today I probably would be diagnosed as ADHD and put on Ritalin, but then I was just known as a kind of a bold, talkative, precocious, pretentious child. So I was bipolar as a child, but I was diagnosed as a young adult.
Right. Okay. And do you have ADHD?
I've never been tested for it, and I don't see the value. I have a sneaking suspicion that everybody under the surface has elements of PTSD, ADHD, OCD. It's a kind of it's a maelstrom that goes on within all of us. It's this huge crucible in which our lives are kind of bubbling away, and some people suffer greatly and need help. But most of us, I think everyone is probably diagnosable. But until an extreme set of circumstances or an event pushes them, or an unfortunate situation happens, it doesn't bring it to the fore. I also know people who have been diagnosed with ADHD who do not medicate because they don't want to. They don't want to not be themselves. And and this is a strange one, but in my last few years of spiritual growth and recovery growth, I have started to thank God for my beautiful brain, because I don't know what it's like not to be bipolar. People say, would you like to not be bipolar? I don't know. And I do know that I love my brain now after 10 years, 11 years of recovery and the work I do on myself. I do love it.
The reason why I asked this is because you mentioned, this would have been what would have been going on, and diagnosis for ADHD would have been what might have occurred at that time. Looking at you as a child, then we on this podcast obviously don't have any official stance on whether people should or shouldn't be diagnosed and so on and so forth. I do know that in my own addiction and recovery, it has played a role, but let's return to your childhood. It sounds like what you said there, that a lot of it was a good time. You were speaking of sunny afternoons and flare trousers, if I remember it well. Which is lovely. Now, question 2 is, what did the moment you first got hooked, or what did the fun times look like? So here you are, you're a young, gay teenager, in flare trousers, possibly. At some point, something comes into your life, a substance, a behavior, alcohol, perhaps drugs, and they did something for you that you can't do for yourself. How did that manifest?
I think it actually goes back to before the substances. I think it goes back to, I lived and worked as an actor for many, many years, and I still work in the theatre arts world. And I think the high of performance, the high of singing and giving my all on stage and entertaining people, and the feedback from an audience, I think that started very young. I started in theatre when I was about 7. I was involved in child theatre, and I joined the National Youth Theatre when I was 15 and 14, 15, and was performing on West End stages in 15, 16, 17. And the high that I achieved through performance was just unknown, unquenchable, the thirst for it. And that drove me to a university, or a polytechnic as it was then, that studied performing arts. And then I was introduced to my first joint. So that was the first substance. I was 18 years old, and it was a marijuana spliff. And I then, as part of my story, I always say someone gave me a joint when I was 18, and I put it out when I was 44, because that really was, that was a journey. Because And I think it was a response to the hyperactive mind that marijuana numbs you. Now, marijuana takes off all the edges. It just, I used to say I could sit and watch television for 6 hours. I can't watch television for 6 minutes now. I to sit and neutralize myself. And alcohol was never much of an issue. I was never a great fan. I had alcohol in my life from about 14. I would drink, but getting drunk wasn't it. Getting stoned at uni was a big thing. And then when I started in my professional career, I took my first line of cocaine. And that was then a beginning of a lifelong love affair that lasted for 20 plus years.
Yeah. So you started really, by the time I love by the way, before we go there, I love the reaching back into certain behaviors that we've had maybe before we touched the substance. I was also born with the look at me illness, of wanting to perform, of, having, I call it an illness, it's maybe a bit much, but, certainly gene, let's just say that gene is less, it's got less judgment in it. And so I didn't perform at as high a level as you did at an early age, but I do know the high of performing and so on and so forth. I think it's a really, really interesting point that you make there. But when it comes to you being introduced to marijuana and it calming you down, do you think it was an attempt on your behalf of calming yourself, of medicating yourself?
Not at that stage. It was purely to fit in. I was really, it was peer pressure. It was to be able to sit in the parties in a circle with a record sleeve on my lap and to roll a joint. And we giggled because in those days, of course, we smoked hash, and hash.
Yeah.
You get the munchies and you get the laughs, the giggles. It's not like this hypoponic skunk that we were smoking, that people smoke nowadays that just literally blitzes your mind. This was fun stuff. We laughed and laughed and
yeah, I remember those days. Yeah,
and then made mountains out of chocolate. We would buy exorbitant for a student. We'd spend £10 on chocolate, which was insane, and then we'd build a mountain of chocolate and eat it together whilst laughing. And it became every night.
Yeah.
It became every night.
Yeah,
and my partner at the time would drink as well, and I just wouldn't. I'd drink tea. I wasn't interested in alcohol. Marijuana was enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, when cocaine came along, I found that alcohol took the edge off the cocaine buzz. So it was really good to kind of have a long school so that you didn't get too paranoid, psychotic or neurotic.
So talk to us a little bit about your experiences, your first experiences with cocaine. I've often spoken here about the first time I took ecstasy, which was just a semi-religious experience. It's a sad thing to say, but it is true. Was it something similar, or did it rather creep up on you?
Again, it was peer pressure that made me have my first line. And then I kind of liked it. But then being someone who is default setting confident, talks too much and thinks well of himself. That thing of people say they took cocaine and they derived. They suddenly felt funny. I was already funny. They suddenly felt confident. I was already confident. They suddenly felt they could communicate with people. I could do that. They felt they could go into a room and be themselves. I was great at that. But that was and I always say this as well. But that I actually people did say to me, "You're the only person I ever knew who took cocaine to calm down." And that was my insight. I would take, in the beginning, it would be a line. It would make me feel so great that I would just want to go out into the world and be with the world. And then, of course, at the end, it was about being with my, and the destruction of addiction.
Yes.
But initially, it was a party. It was a party drug. It was to get out there and to go all night long and knock back the champagne and the vodka and then maybe go clubbing. Although I was a bit of a purist. When I was clubbing, I preferred to stick with E because ecstasy was better. If you mixed ecstasy and coke, it didn't really work. One cancelled the other and you ended up nowhere. I can remember the early days in the clubs with ecstasy. And when I first took my first pills, you literally, your stomach would revolt, your knees would buckle, and quite often people would vomit. I didn't always, in fact, I didn't many times, but it was a massive chemical reaction that then lasted for 2 days. That was in the early 90s. By the time I was clubbing in my 40s, sad as that may sound, you take it in, you'd feel all right in a half an hour's time. You'd feel okay. You feel a bit happy. You might fancy a bit of a dance. But when in my 20s, it was, this is the greatest thing in the world. It couldn't. So, again, I think it did creep up on me in terms of the necessity for having it. Who can say whether the addiction is, the denial of the addiction is so huge at the early stages that you're just like, no, I'm just a user. But I was very much a party drug taker, smoking a spliff all the time, cocaine when it came my way in the early days, and ecstasy for the clubs.
Right. Okay. But then, if we sort of pause for a second and consider this, right? It sounds a bit like, even though there weren't too many consequences at this point, that you had a sort of chemical solution for all circumstances, right? You're out clubbing, ecstasy, cocaine here and there when it comes your way. And then, if all else failed, you'd be sitting at home smoking joints. So there was always something going on.
Well, and also add into that because I had the very basic neuroleptic drugs for my bipolar in my 20s and 30s, which basically were tranquilizers. There's no sophistication to pre 2000 mental health drugs. They were basically awake or asleep. So I could take drugs for as long as I wanted, and then I could take more drugs to sleep. So I didn't have those consequences of lying in your bed, grinding your teeth and worrying that you're not going to be able to get up for work the following morning. No, because I could go to bed and take a few neuroleptics. I was on Largactil for 12 years. Largactil is basically a drug that could put an elephant to sleep. It's just it's a liquid kosh. And I was on that, and I would party for as long as I wanted, have a spliff to calm down when I had a chill out with myself, and then put myself to sleep.
Yeah.
So it kind of removed the consequences. So not only was I partying and living, altering my state, I was also sleeping and recovering quite well.
Of course, at that time, this sounds like it might have sounded like it would be, at the time, of course, a perfect solution, right? You can have all the stuff that you want, do as many pills as you like, do as many lines as you like. And then afterwards, because I remember lying in bed, for what seemed an eternity, right? And, palpitations in particular, right? It ends up on every day on my gratitude list, almost every day. I don't have no palpitations anymore, right? So if you do away with those pretty early consequences like that, right? Because I suppose it's fair to say that, we don't really lose our jobs right away, or a partner or something like that. The first consequences usually that come to us are the immediate consequences of hangovers, of sleepless nights, grinding teeth, and all of that. So you did away with those by using other drugs, which at the time must have felt like wonderful, but really it's quite dangerous in many ways.
Oh, I actually said to a psychologist who was talking to me about my drug use, I said, so I'm bipolar and I like to use amphetamines. What's wrong with that? And now, from my position of recovery for the time I've been, it's total madness. It's completely madness. The chemicals in my brain were misfiring anyway. I was adding more maelstrom to that. And then I was drugging myself unconscious. It was the potential dangers is insane.
Indeed so. So our question 3, dovetailing quite nicely with where we're at really in this conversation, is our question 3, what were your worst consequences and finally your rock bottom? So in other words, how did it progress?
Okay, so I became, in my 30s, a daily user.
Right.
I was in a big West End show and I was doing a line before every scene. I was getting through a show, and then at least one to party afterwards, and then sleeping, obviously putting myself to sleep, waking up at 4 o'clock and starting all over again. So the consequences that really took, it's this constant oxymoron of being a functioning addict. You think you're a functioning, you think nobody knows, but in truth, everybody knows. Not everybody knows exactly what's going on, but everybody knows something is going on.
Yeah, let's pause there for a second, because it's a massive bugbear of mine as well, right? This concept of being a functioning addict, right? There's something that would apply to me because, I was still working and so on when I came into the rooms, but, there was nothing really functioning, nothing much functioning about me. So I really love that you addressed this here. It looks like we're functioning, right? Functioning needs to at least come in inverted commas, right? Because it looks like we're functioning because our addiction hasn't taken certain things from us quite yet. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think it's self-denial. I think denial is self-denial. It is denial. And you think you're getting away with it and there's nothing wrong with what's happening in your life and it's all perfectly okay. And actually you're totally wrong, because you're slowly but surely undoing everything good in your life. And for me, the consequence that came was that I'm pretty sure that it became known in the industry that I was a drug taker, and that meant I wasn't getting the auditions, and I wasn't getting the shows, and I wasn't getting the work, and so I was out of work, and yet I was still scraping together enough money to go on binges. Like, I couldn't afford day use anymore, but I was binging.
Yeah.
I was still damaging my mental health. And basically I had a major nervous breakdown when I was 22, when I was 38, and when I was 44.
Right.
Three times I was sectioned. I was committed under the Mental Health Act. I was not allowed to leave the hospital. I was under legal requirement to take the medication I was then prescribed, whatever that may have been, different for all three occasions. And my final rock bottom was when I was 44 years old, the third time I ended up in a psychiatric unit, on the floor, weeping.
Yeah.
Because at that stage, I thought I'd lost everything. The house, the job, the career, the car, the trust, the love of my family, my husband, anything good in my life. I was pretty sure at the age of 44, lying in a fetal position on the floor of a psychiatric unit, weeping, that was where my addiction had got me. And that I identify as my rock bottom.
Yeah. It's a very stark reality when that happens, right? How was your third bottom, if you will, which you call your rock bottom, different from the ones at 22 and at 30, forgive me, at 38, apologies.
38, yeah.
So you've had a couple of warnings there. So how was it different, each time, do you find?
Well, I think it's very interesting. There's so many answers to that, but one of the answers is there were 16 years between my first and second infectioning. And so you kind of think, well, someone with bipolar having an incident every 16 years, that's bloody good. There were 6 years between my second and third.
Yeah.
And a psychiatrist pointed out to me that if I had continued, the episode would have come closer and closer and closer together until I was just basically bouncing in and out, in, out, in, out, in, out. I would have just been basically institutionalized for the rest of my life. But at 44, feeling, how have I done it again? How have I got here again? How did I not learn from 1 and 2? How did 3 happen? And then I had, I do believe a spiritual intervention where somebody said to me, you need to deal with your drug addiction. And I had never before thought it might be a problem. And somebody guided me towards rehab, which had never happened before. It had always been assumed that I was just having a psychiatric incident and therefore I should just carry on with my life. But then I just picked up the drugs again.
Yeah. How if you're comfortable talking about it, what symptoms were you showing that you would be sectioned?
It's very, very good to talk about symptoms because it's good that we in the fellowship can recognize it in other people.
Yeah.
So there is a total lack of normality in someone who's having a psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
They might be very articulate, they might be very persuasive, but they are totally single-minded, completely grandiose, paranoid delusions that could lead to fixations of messianic status, belief, paranoid to the level that they think they're being watched, monitored, followed. Like there's actually a squad of MI6 that's following them.
Right.
Spending money. I mean, the money I went through when I was manic, huge amounts, just £200 on a Filofax. I remember this point. I remember once, £200 on a piece of stationery. Just spending money like no one's business. Sleeping almost as a kind of maybe 1, 2, 3 hours if you're lucky.
Right.
Constant on the go, completely unable to take any negative or even informed criticism. Anyone with an opinion that doesn't totally align with what you want, what you see, what you believe is the enemy. Must be blocked, must be moved away from, must be locked away from your life, which is why people run away, which is why people go places they've never been, which is why people, do the most. There are terrible things that people do when they're manic. Psychosis. I mean, cocaine-induced psychosis is similar.
Right.
Add in a bipolar psychosis, and you get God complexes, you get paranoid delusions, you get absolute lack of connection to what is real and here and now.
To which you are obviously unaware. Yes. And
you think you're right.
Yeah, because you are unaware, because you think you're right, I'm assuming that the last thing that would come to your mind is the idea that the stuff that you're also taking to make yourself feel a bit better is having a negative influence on all of this.
If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
The real irony is that when you're in a truly manic state, it's better than any drugs. It's better than any line of cocaine. It's better than 100 lines of cocaine. It's better than crack. When your brain has got to that point where it is firing in that very unwell way, you feel fantastic. You feel amazing.
Right.
There's a truism that some people with bipolar don't medicate because they like their highs. They want to experience the highs and they don't want them to be removed from their lives. I am so because I used to induce my highs through cocaine and then take them down with Largactil. So I had this ridiculous belief that I was controlling my manic depression. Fantastic. And then now when I see, I monitor myself so very closely. I still medicate. I still am in contact with psychiatric services. And yet I've had no intervention for the 11 years I've been in the program. I've needed no medical intervention.
Which is wonderful.
It's not everyone's story, but it's my story.
Yeah.
That I would not now want a manic episode.
Yeah.
I would not now seek a manic episode in the same way that I don't want a cocaine high.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want that anymore. I have nothing in my life that I want to achieve that needs that.
Sure.
And I want to, because I firmly believe, and I've been seeing something recently, the difference between pursuing pleasure and pursuing happiness. If you are pursuing pleasure, you are necessarily taking yourself towards addiction. If you are pursuing happiness, you are necessarily taking yourself towards serenity and contentedness. And that is something I feel now on a daily basis.
Yeah.
A serenity and a contentedness that was alien to my 26 years alcohol and drug abuse, and was alien for my 30 years of living as somebody with bipolar.
Right. Now, usually at this point, I would put in that as a podcast, we don't take any official position, of course, about how one's mental illness might have to be treated, and that you should go and see a healthcare professional, in order to get the right diagnosis and take the medication that they prescribe. Right? Is there something that you would like to add to that, or is that enough? As the one who has experienced this,
it is a deeply personal decision about taking medication, but I would urge anyone who is suffering, if you're not suffering, if you have, they talk about this, about mental health in the third world, and how because there isn't the resources, and there isn't big pharma, and there isn't loads of drugs being pumped down people's throats because of the corruption between the production of medicine and the selling of it. The people have incidences, have episodes, and then learn to live with themselves, and then learn to be incorporated in their society, and then learn to be as they are. And on my journey, I assume that I will eventually come off medication entirely. But if you are struggling and suffering and in pain and in anguish, help is available. But no one should be forced to medicate. I absolutely believe that.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much for clear words. At your worst, did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide?
That is not an easy answer, because the answer is no. I never actually really wanted to end my life, but did I scare people around me with suicidal ideation? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did, because I used to say when I was manic, if I can't live like this, I don't want to live at all.
Mm.
And what I meant was, leave me alone, let me live like this. But of course, that sent off all the fire alarms in all of the psychiatric units and all the psychiatric services I was engaged with. He's suicidal ideation. He needs to be restrained. I was restrained more than once and medicated against my will, which I'll tell you, Silvio, is one of the most traumatic things that's ever happened to me in my life. To be held down with a knee on my head. I will never recover from that. And this comes back to what I said a minute ago about how nobody should ever be forcibly medicated. But I did not, in my heart, believe that I wanted to die. But I told people that if they couldn't let me live the way I live, then they might just kill me.
Did you use this as a weapon, sort of consciously?
No. I will. There is no manipulation and duality when you're manic. You are completely unfiltered. Your everything just comes blurting out.
Okay. Thank you, Christopher. Question 5. What other methods did you try to get sober before finding the rooms, if any?
I did the whole lot.
Let's have it.
I did drinking a pint of alcohol between water between beer. So pint of beer, pint of alcohol. Only drinking beer, only drinking wine. Stopping, not taking drugs in the week, only taking drugs at the weekend. I had therapy with a kind of new age therapist who encouraged me to stop taking all medication and think and meditate my way out of mental health and addiction. And of course, like every good addict, I stopped taking my prescribed medication and I carried on taking drugs, alcohol and spliff and cocaine. And it led me to be very unwell. I had acupuncture, which was kind of paired with therapy. So it was talking whilst poking, and that was supposed to realign my inner chakras and everything. And
oh wow, I've never heard of this.
Yeah. One day I'd had a very big breakthrough session with her. We really got to the root of my addiction. She said, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do a special down the spine. So all down my spine, some 20 needles or something to circumvent this trauma that we've been talking about. And I literally left the session and thought, that's it. I cracked it. And I called the dealer.
Yeah.
I called the dealer after that session. So
you tried lots. I'd like to say, though, just very quickly here, because it is important. I firmly believe that, be it therapy, acupuncture, trying to, drink more water when you're drinking alcohol and all of those things, they're all good things really in and of themselves. It's just that they didn't cure us of our addiction, right? They didn't help us. They get a lot of bad rep, which they don't necessarily deserve. It's just that they didn't do what we wanted them.
They work for people who think, I'm a moderate user, maybe I'm using a bit too much, let me pull back a bit. But they're not going to work for addicts.
Yeah.
Because we have an illness, we have a disease, we have something that needs to be addressed at a fundamental level, which I'm sure we'll get on to. But they're basically, tarting around the edges and not going into the center of the issue that addiction is an illness.
It's still worth pointing out, though, that therapy and outside help, as we always call it, therapy and other things, they're really, really good as long as you are sober and working a program. Right, great. Thank you.
Well put.
Question 6. When you got into the rooms, did you struggle with the word God?
Absolutely. Refused it, rebuked it, almost said this isn't going to work for me because of it. I actually said in my first meeting, you can keep that God stuff, because if you think the medieval mumbo jumbo surrounding a man standing on a cloud with a big beard telling me how I'm going to live my life is going to help, you've come to the wrong place. I am a recovering Catholic, I always used to say, thinking I was funny, and I have A-level guilt, thinking I was funny, and I could not conscience that this idea of Alcoholics Anonymous or any of the fellowships was connected to the metaphysical nonsense of everybody's pretend friend who lives in the sky. Don't be so stupid. And how I have learned, how I've grown and how I've overcome that prejudice, that bias, that ignorance of what God actually is, of what God can actually do, and of how it is central to our recovery.
So our question 7 is, how do you experience your higher power, or quote unquote your pretend friend, as you said? And it would be lovely if you could perhaps sort of give us a few moments there of how you actually managed to get rid of the prejudice and work a step 2 and a step 3 and all the other steps that are required, but certainly step 2 and 3.
Yeah, I worked very hard with my sponsor, my first sponsor, who was an amazing guide. The sentence willingness to believe changed my life because I had no belief, but I knew something had to change. And so my sponsor explained to me that all you need at this stage is the willingness. Willingness. If you don't believe, just believe that I believe. The willingness to go on a journey, a spiritual journey. So that is how it started. And I started with, okay, I'm going to believe in the harmony of the spheres, Mother Earth, nature, the universe. But as I have progressed, God has played a fabulous game with me because he has brought me back to my church. I am now a member of LGBT Catholics of Westminster, which when I came in was, 30 years ago, the idea of gay people going to mass was ludicrous, and that's a real change in our modern world, and it's a wonderful thing. But I now am a practicing Catholic, and I have spiritual encounters on a daily basis. And I believe my faith is still growing. My spirituality is still moving. So if anyone is at the beginning of their journey and they're struggling, just stay with it. Get the willingness, look at good orderly direction, Grund of drunk, go out dancing, great outdoors, anything that can bring you to a power greater than yourself. That's all we're asking at the beginning. Something bigger than Christopher was all I needed to do. And I managed to. And through it's very clearly, if we open the door just a tiny bit, we can always open it more. But if we cannot start to open the door towards a willingness to believe, then we are going to be in a world of pain.
Yeah, it is not dissimilar at all to my journey. I have to say, I came in also a recovering Catholic, and I had absolutely. So the words that saved me, quote unquote, were as you understand him, or as you understood him, right? So the fact that I could bring my own concept, right, and that I could really revisit this and not have to take over, because what I was rebelling against, unbeknownst to me then, I just didn't have that knowledge. It took me a little while to sort of be willing, right? And then after a while, it sort of came to me, was rebelling against essentially my mother's vision of God, and this sort of what I felt was a prescribed way of believing, and that everything had to be rooted through this guy Jesus, and and then I grew up partially in Italy, so I would see they still do this, and it's great for them, but for me it felt alienating that they sort of have these relics of saints in sarcophagus. What's sarcophagi, I guess, is the plural, I guess, in the sarcophagi and all sorts of other relics and urns and whatnot that they sort of carry in this big procession through the village every year and all of that. And I felt really alienated by that and felt that it was weird and odd, and I rejected that. I just didn't have any words like this. I had no knowledge of this. And I had to go, like you, go through like stepping stones, like sort of like the wheels on a kid's bike, with good first, because I sort of believed there was good, you just remove an O after a while. I went with the rooms, right, group of drunks, because I felt that something happened in those rooms which was bigger than the sum of the parts of the people that were in there. And it was the very, very, very similar journey for me. And I found it difficult. I found it was hard work. For me, it was the open-mindedness that was lacking. And I hear that we had a very, very similar struggle at the beginning. Thank you so much.
I was really shut off to it as well. When I did the step 3 prayer the first time, I did it in just a church, and it didn't resonate to me. And so my sponsor said, you've got to find somewhere that you connect to. This is what you said, of your own understanding, something that resonates with you. Because we all have something.
Absolutely. I say to sponsees that anything will do if you can find a place with a wonderful view, maybe, that you relate to, a place that you really like for whatever reason. A place by the sea is wonderful, or if you're near mountains or hills or forest or something like that. Anything that means anything at all to you. Or maybe someone's grave. Whatever it is, but anything that means something to you, because you're quite right. Things that, as I said, very much quote unquote, I felt were prescribed at the time, wouldn't work for me, right? I needed to find my own. It was a really important process. I love churches now. I just didn't then.
Yeah, the sentence that meant the most to me, I heard in my very first meeting. A lot of people say they don't remember their first meeting. I remember a lot about my first meeting. I said, I don't believe in your God or any God. And the speaker said to me, do you believe in anything bigger than yourself? And that was the beginning of my journey. Well, of course, Christopher isn't the biggest thing in the universe. Of course, the world doesn't revolve around me. Of course, I'm not the most primarily important. My arrogance and ego, even then, could see that. And now, all the way down the line that I am now, I love being part of a greater thing than me. Be it the fellowship, be it my faith, be it my community. It's wonderful. But that was a beautiful way to start. Do you believe in anything bigger than yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I had very similar thoughts. Even I understood that, clearly I am not the biggest thing in the world, and not quite that deluded. And I don't know, make it rain, or I don't make the sun shine. So therefore, something else is going on here. And all I needed to do was to just hold on to that and not look any further. That was all that was needed. Thank you. Our question 8. Which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you? I'm guessing 2 and 3 might play a part here, but let's hear how it continued.
I would say it was all hard, all of it, because I was so arrogant and self-opinionated, and I believe Christopher is right at all times. That's how I lived my life. So the step 4 was tortuous. I was on it for months. Step 5 went on for 3 days. I actually loved step 9. I thought that was the most beautiful thing. The hardest part, I think, was actually working, not turning up to a meeting and having a nice chat with a nice person that tells you nice things and feeling part of a fellowship and having coffee with a like-minded friend and meeting new people and all these lovely things that meetings give you. Having a sponsor to support you. My first sponsor was really there to make me work the steps, and I worked them. I struggled with all of them, and I hope my sponsees now have a slightly different experience. That they feel the growth, because I didn't feel it. I felt what am I doing this for? This is just nonsense. What do you mean if I write it all down, it's going to go away? Or what do you mean I'm going to be able to process my path? What do you mean keeping my side of the street clean? What are you on about? I was so arrogant and ignorant and so assured of my own supreme intelligence. I think you can be too clever for the steps. I think you can actually think yourself out of doing them. And I did it again and again. And my sponsor had the best comeback ever. He just used to say to me, well, you can find another sponsor, which was brilliant because it made me think, well, I'm not going to fail. I can't fail. Christopher doesn't fail. So it made me double down and do the work. But they have totally transformed my life. And I get the joy of taking other people through them at this stage of my recovery, and they continue. The literature and the work continues to improve my life. If anyone's struggling, it is worth the struggle. Do the work.
Absolutely. Thank you. Our question 9. Which character defects give you most trouble?
Wow. I've been working a lot on character defects quite recently, actually, funnily enough. So that's why I'm kind of pausing slightly to formulate an answer. My constant lack of patience, speed to anger, frustration, impatience with other people, judging other people, judgment. Why? Why do I still think that Christopher's way is the best way when everybody else is just doing their best? Taking other people's inventory. That belief, that's the kind of default activity of superiority. I work really, really hard. One of my constant jokes in my chairs I give is that I am the world's champion at humility now. I'm the best person at being humble in the world. And that's the joke, is that I don't understand, and I admire humble people so much, and I try so hard to improve my grip on humility. That's my goal. Yeah. That's my character defect. The absence of humility would be the goal that I have as maybe when I'm 30 years sober, I'll have a talk with you, Silvio, and we'll discuss how it's going.
I'm loving the concept, though. I have to say, I'm the best at humility. I'm the best humble guy around. Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Christopher. I think pride is a shared problem here. Or defect, rather. It's one day at a time.
Yes.
Question 10. What is the best thing recovery has given you?
Christopher. I lost him. I was a very happy child, as we kind of touched on in the beginning. And I am now the person I should have been. Well, no, because I have no regrets. There's no point raking over the past and getting pain from memory. I now look and I smile at my errors and my disgraces. And I have moved on. I processed the pain of my using, but feeling that I am now doing God's work, living a good life, and I'm happy, joyous, and free. The program has provided that for me. And I hope I help some people along the way. And I know that when I try, even if I don't succeed, if I try to help someone, I feel better about myself. So I think it's a sense of self. It's a sense of becoming. That is the greatest gift. I am the human being that God wants me to be, that I am to be for my fellows and my friends. And it's an ever giving circuit between myself and my God and my fellows. It's just a constant source of joy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Question 11. What would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict?
Only you can decide if you're an addict. We are not a cult, because if you don't need to be here, we don't want you here. And in fact, if you can carry on using and drinking moderately and live a fabulous life, then hats off to you, and do that. If you're new in and you're a newcomer and you want to try, get to the meetings, talk to people, and listen. Stick with the winners. And if you are going to do it, get a sponsor and start the work. Start the work. That's the only answer. The recovery, the solution to our disease is in the program. It's there. It works. If you're doubting, maybe go out and experience some more research. And if your misery brings you back, we will be happy to see you. However many times it brings you back, we will be happy to see you.
Yeah, we will indeed. I always, at this point, will always reiterate also that we are the worst cult in the world, of course, in AA or CA or any other anonymous fellowship, because you can bring your own God. You don't have to pay any money. We don't want your money, and you can leave anytime you like. That's a really terrible cult, I have to say. It's just really rubbish cult.
Yeah, and if you don't want to be here, you can go.
Yeah, exactly.
We are the worst cult.
Indeed so. Brilliant. Thank you, Christopher. Our last question today, our question 12. What do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
Oh.
Dramatic pause.
So I think there's two things. One is you tried. Well done, you tried. And hopefully the second thing out of his mouth will be you're welcome. Because, Silvio, if I pray thank you once a day, if I pray it virtually with every second thought, I am so grateful. I am so grateful. I know the old cliche, a grateful addict never picks up, and I love it. But I'm so grateful for so much of my life, and I thank and praise my higher power constantly for that. So well done, you tried, and you're welcome.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Christopher, I could talk to you all afternoon. You probably have better things to do and other things to do. Thank you so much. It's been really, really wonderful to have you. It was very entertaining to have you, which I very much expected you to be. I know you well. Thank you for being my guest today on 12 Steps and 12 Questions.
It's been my honest pleasure.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-step recovery program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-step fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not for profit. And you know this next bit. It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.